Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I've got the Page of Swords as the obstacle and the Ace of Swords as the opportunity. So let's start with the obstacle, Page of Swords. Um, I see I see pages as the the sophists of the Page of Swords. Most of the pages, in fact, they're like the couriers of the particular suit that I think sometimes get you know, their parcel mixed up with their own identity, so to speak. So, like delivering important documents to a queen, let's say, does not make you the queen yourself, right? Um, the Page of Swords in the Waite deck is often seen as a spy or some sort of informant, an individual that moves around collecting information, looking for information. The obstacle here certainly could be in that sense related to someone who's keeping tabs on you or tracking, tallying your behavior, something like that. It could also be a warning against doing that yourself, engaging in that kind of scorekeeping of individuals, particularly, I don't know, counterintuitive in let's say like relationships, counting how many times did someone argue about something, that kind of a thing. Um, I also see the Page of Swords in particular as representing sophistry. It's someone who has possession of certain ideas, maybe certain arguments that are well beyond their natural capacity to create, but they have nonetheless gotten a hold of these and they go around using them to win arguments. So, uh, an example, for instance, could be someone who has figured out the meta strategy in an argument of arguing either for subjectivity or objectivity, always the opposite of whatever their opponent in an argument is essentially arguing for. If someone is making uh, a case for a particular point based on objective reasoning, then you just point out that they're missing out on the subjective angle, or vice versa. Um, these are often individuals who they don't have any position of their own, um, and the thing they value is winning an argument, and just it doesn't bring them necessarily any closer to understanding any of the topics they might be arguing for or against, but nonetheless, they pursue it for that satisfaction of winning. So, yeah, this could be a warning of either having to deal with someone like this who you will not win against with reason. There is no specific point that they firmly stand on. Their only commitment is to winning the argument, and they'll shift around. They'll squirm around and always find some new angle to attack from. It could also be a warning to, be cautious of falling into that kind of situation yourself, where maybe you lose sight of what it was of value that you were arguing for in the first place, and now you're just using whatever ideas at your disposal to try and win the argument, to try and justify your position. Intelligent people can often just do this impulsively, instinctively, right? So um, yeah, it's something to watch out for. In terms of the Marseille card, I think this card in a lot of ways symbolizes indecision. The valet's feet are pointing in opposite directions. He's not really sure which way he's going. His sword is drawn, but it looks like he's looking at the scabbard. Is he contemplating putting the sword away? Is he going to keep it out? He it looks like he's kind of tapping his hat with it, kind of engaging in a gesture of pondering whether to even use this sword, even to commit to an idea. So in this sense, it could symbolize, again, more so not making up your mind. Whereas with the Waite card, it's someone who doesn't care that they haven't made up their mind about something. They're just interested in in that argument. In terms of the neighbors, the Waite card, it's something that comes after the two of swords, which could represent a duality, a plurality of ideas that is paralyzing. That would be the more negative interpretation. On the positive side, it would be a plurality of ideas that actually give someone a balanced outlook. You know, if you had, if you've never considered the benefits of a conservative position, let's say, can you really argue clearly for the liberal, you know, or vice versa? It's like, are you really a conservative if you aren't even familiar with the benefits of you know, liberal thought approaching things? So this is, yeah, the page is an individual who sort of exists on that plane with that on one side, and then with the three of swords, man, the Waite card is, it seems so dramatic, right? Um, in the Marseille deck, I don't know. I think it's a little bit. It has less of this emotional impact to it, but it is a card that both of these cards still exist on this very grounded Earth-like plane of reality. We're not really dealing with a plane related to the personal, to the individual, you know, person's experience of the world. It's kind of just like ideas about pretty tangible things, um, and it's also not the highly abstract or even spiritual, metaphysical, whatever. So yeah, the page is kind of, he's not very sophisticated, despite the tendency for sophistry, which is, I always found that such an ironic kind of, it's just, you know, saying, oh, that's very sophisticated. It's like that used to be an insult. That used to essentially accuse the person of being a sophist. Now it's like a compliment. But anyway, as far as the opportunity, Ace of Swords, and some interesting differences between the Marseille and the Waite. But Ace of Swords, I really like the way it's, or I like an aspect of the way that it's depicted in the Waite deck. Um, all of the aces in the Waite deck are similar in the sense that they all have this hand appearing out of nowhere, and it in some way is interacting with the symbol representing the suit. In some of them, the hand is gently holding or presenting the object. In this one, it is firmly gripping the sword, right? So first of all, you got the appearance almost out of nowhere of this thing, the sword representing, you know, conscious, deliberate reasoning, ideas. Um, I think that's a sign for the potential opportunity for, you know, for something new. It's the beginning of a whole new suit. We're in kind of a chaotic state of high potential. Something new could happen, but also the way in which the hand is firmly grasping onto this sword, and you know, it's got this crown. I think this symbolizes, to me, this symbolizes committing to a singular committing to a singular idea. And I think even I think I could even go further than saying idea. I think this is like committing to a virtue, which I would consider to be the most basic, fundamental um, axiom of what later on then leads to rationing, you know, rational thought, reasoning, things like that. I think it's commitment to a singular value that you can then build a moral or ethical structure upon, something against which then you could make moral judgments, right? So it's the it's the origin of this new belief, this new idea. And whereas the suit of wands has just ended, essentially the 10 of wands was this card of, you know, almost enslavement to the impulsive, creative, sexual, active, but all of those in a very instinctive way, right? They're all like reflexive behaviors. It could be, you know, the 10 of wands could be a really great card. It could symbolize a kind of flow state that often often people who are really experienced at a particular task can get into the state where they are essentially just mindlessly performing sometimes even very complex things, and they're doing a phenomenal job at it. And it's a very enjoyable state, but it doesn't really have it doesn't really have this sort of conscious involvement with it. Um, so on the on the optimistic side of things, it's it's the kind of ideas that come out of that flow state. On the negative side, it's potentially the kind of revolutionary reactions to being enslaved by some sort of labor, some sort of task, finding yourself, finding yourself a slave to your emotional responses uh, to a situation, specifically oriented around, I would say, with wands, so it'd be like creativity, physical actions, sexuality, things like that. So sometimes it could be the Ace of Swords could symbolize like a, a revolution that frees you from that subjugation. In this case, I think that there's a fun way of interpreting this is just that consuming yourself consuming yourself in activity, particularly physical activity, often brings forth great ideas. And I mean, I can only speak from personal experience, a couple of friends that I have, but um, sometimes if you're stuck for ideas, going for like a long walk or engaging in some physical activity um, is just a great recipe for having a breakthrough, for having a great idea. So I kind of see the Ten of Wands and the Ace of Swords as being connected in that narrative. It's like this this great new revelation is a byproduct of some sort of all-consuming physical task. So yeah, I think this is a pretty good card. And the one of the interesting differences, I mean, look how much more colorful the Marseille card is. The with the Marseille card, I think there's a little bit more symbolically suggested as to the sort of potential mystery and possibility, like the potential of ideas. I think is hinted at more. The sword, the swords in the Marseille deck generally are depicted as red when they're sheathed. So this isn't. I don't think this is intended to be interpreted as a sword covered in blood or something. It's a sword in its sheath, and the sheath is red, and the red is, um, you know, similar to the Ten of Wands here that precedes it. Red is the color of wands and is the color that represents action, especially impulsive action, creativity, sexuality. But so I see this as a scabbard or a sheath that just is is just demanding to be torn off, to be taken off. And at this point, we're not sure what's going to be underneath it. Some of the swords are depicted as blue, some of the swords are depicted as yellow. I think there's one that's like flesh color. The colors have a lot of meaning, particularly the Marseille deck. But so I think this card largely symbolizes the potential to uncover some new idea, and we might not necessarily know what that is yet. The ones are largely aces being number one cards. Ones are largely symbolic of a chaotic state of unlimited potential. So the Waite card has a slightly different interpretation of it, whereas to me it seems to focus on the rigid adherence to a specific idea, a commitment to go with one way of looking at things. And I think that in a way this is an interesting way to interpret a possible solution to dealing with the Page of Swords. Now, if this is an individual that you're dealing with, then this card could symbolize an approach of either asking, either addressing them as to what it is that they are specifically committed to, because often people in this kind of position, so if it's like they won't commit to any particular position, they're just there to make you lose. They're not there to make themselves, win or make their own point, come out as looking superior. If this page symbolizes potentially, some obstacles that you might have in yourself, then again, this solution is to take up a specific, you know, a specific standpoint, a specific idea, a specific value, or ideally go all the way down to virtues and figure out which virtue above all else is the one that deserves your commitment, right? Um, but yeah, so there's some ideas. Hope you got something interesting out of it. Drop me a like if you had a good time. Any comments are entered into a draw for a free one-on-one reading on Sunday. So feel free to leave a comment, or if you just want to say hi, that is also very cool. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.